Welcome to Conspiracy Deconstructed. Our mission, really, is to take these huge, sometimes overwhelming stacks of information, the raw leaks, the history behind them, the psychology, and boil it down. We want to give you the core insights, that knowledge shortcut you need to grasp how these, frankly, bizarre and often dangerous narratives get cooked up and spread.
And today we're tackling a really critical case study. It's disturbing, honestly, but it's become almost a blueprint for modern digital disinformation. We're talking about Pizzagate.
Right.
This thing moved incredibly fast, faster than almost anything we'd seen before, from these sort of dark corners of the internet right into the physical world.
Yeah.
And it led directly to violence. So we're going to trace its, let's call it its bizarre anatomy. We'll dismantle the core claims, and then, this is crucial, we're going to connect this very modern thing back to a terrifyingly old and destructive pattern. The Blood Libel.
Okay, let's just dive right in and state the central claim. Because it is. Well, it's wild, it's complex, and it's absolutely horrifying. So the Pizzagate theory alleged that hacked emails from high-ranking Democrats, specifically Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign chair, John Podesta, contained secret codes, hidden messages.
Right. Coded language.
And proponents claimed these codes proved that this beloved, seemingly totally innocent family pizza place in Washington, D.C., Comet Ping Pong, that it was actually the command center, the hub for a global satanic child abuse and human trafficking ring, run, supposedly, by political elites.
And it's so important to understand the stakes here right from the start. This wasn't just some weird internet rumor people argued about online.
No.
This conspiracy theory led directly to, widespread violent death threats,
Right.
Real small business owners, their families getting terrorized, massive harassment, costly harassment, and maybe the most infamous part, an armed man actually traveling to the restaurant.
To self-investigate.
To self-investigate, exactly, based on these completely non-existent claims. And he fired an assault rifle inside the building. So the danger was immediate and very, very real.
So our mission for you listening is pretty focused today. We're going to unpack the specific evidence they claimed fueled all this fear. We'll look at the emails, the photos, the claims about the building itself. Then, piece by piece, we'll dismantle those claims with verifiable facts, with documentation. And finally, we're going to spend some real time connecting this modern digital blood libel back to its historical roots. Because understanding why this specific kind of story about elites, sex, and kids is so sticky across centuries, that's key.
Definitely. And to really get Pizzagate, you have to start with the raw material and the timing. That explains why this narrative really took root so effectively. The foundation, the absolute bedrock, was laid back in March 2016. That's when John Podesta's personal Gmail account got compromised.
And this wasn't some super sophisticated, like, Ocean's 11 heist, right?
Not at all. It was simple, actually.
Yeah.
Deceptively simple, but incredibly effective. It was a spear phishing attack.
Spear phishing. Okay, so targeted.
Exactly. Not just a random spam email. Podesta got an email that looked like a security alert from Google. You know, the usual thing. Someone tried to access your account. Click here to change your password. He forwarded it to his IT staff, and this is where the critical mistake happened. They misread it. They thought a warning about a malicious link was actually confirming the link was legitimate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The advice he got back was, quote, "This is a legitimate email. John needs to change his password immediately." So he clicked the link. And that one click, it gave the hackers access to, basically decades of his personal emails.
Just incredible. And do we know who did it?
We do. U.S. intelligence agencies, cybersecurity researchers, they pretty much universally attributed the breach to this Russian cyber spying group. You might have heard of them, Fancy Bear.
Fancy Bear, yeah.
Yeah.
Connected to Russian intelligence.
Widely believed to be units of the GRU. Russian military intelligence, yes. And the intent seems pretty clear. Information warfare. Specifically aimed at disrupting the U.S. election.
Okay, so the hack happens in March, but the emails didn't come out right away.
No, that's the key thing for the timing. The hackers held on to this massive cache over 20,000 pages of emails, and then WikiLeaks started publishing them, but not until October and November 2016.
Right, smack in the middle of the election chaos.
Exactly, the absolute peak of the presidential election cycle. So suddenly you have this fire hose of raw, personal, totally decontextualized communication just dumped out there for anyone, anywhere to pick through and, misinterpret.
But Pizzagate itself, the specific pedophilia angle, did that come directly from the emails first?
Not quite. Even before the WikiLeaks dump really got weaponized in this specific way, the initial spark seems to have been external. The earliest traceable seed, the very beginning of this particular narrative, seems to be a tweet, October 30th, 2016, from a pretty notoriously aggressive political account. And it falsely claimed the NYPD has found a major pedophilia ring linked to Huma Abedin and Anthony Weiner's emails. That was the hook.
So you've got the leaked emails, you've got this initial rumor, this hook. Where did it actually, cook? Where did the full story come together?
Right, the incubation chamber. That happened with astonishing speed. We're talking about a period maybe 25 hours, starting around November 3rd, 2016. And the place was the 4chan poll message board.
4chan poll, politically incorrect.
Exactly. And you really need to understand the culture there to see why it was the perfect petri dish for this. It's known for, extreme anti-establishment views, a lot of ironic toxicity, as some researchers call it. But crucially, participants there were kind of engaged in this adversarial collaboration, a malicious puzzle-solving game against the liberal establishment.
So they treated the Podesta emails like a treasure map for dirt.
Pretty much, a scavenger hunt. They collaboratively combed through all this data, but they were looking specifically for anything that seemed weird, anomalous, out of context. And they started weaving those bits together into the basic story.
And once it was born there, it didn't stay contained on 4chan, obviously.
Oh, no. It moved fast. It was rapidly shifted over to Reddit. And that's where it really blew up, gained a massive audience almost overnight. This led directly to the creation of a dedicated subreddit, started Pizzagate.
And who populated that?
It was quickly filled and amplified by members from another highly partisan and politically motivated subreddit, Arthur Donald. So it had an instant, energized base.
Okay, so it jumps from the chance to Reddit. How does it get bigger from there?
It follows a pretty textbook disinformation model, actually. Once it had that base on Reddit, it jumped again, this time to dedicated fringe and, frankly, fake news websites. Places like your Newswire, InfoWars.
And they present it as actual news.
Presented as fact, yeah. Then, prominent alt-right figures, pundits on Twitter, they started promoting it heavily, pushing it hard. And that drove it straight into the broader right-wing media ecosystem. It was this relentless, high-volume repetition of these complete falsehoods that researchers say acted as an important driver towards creating this kind of post-truth environment. It turned what started as maybe a malicious joke or a fringe theory into something perceived as real by millions.
And you mentioned foreign involvement, too. That wasn't just domestic spread.
That's another really interesting and kind of disturbing layer. Research found this oddly disproportionate number of tweets pushing the Pizzagate narrative were coming from very specific foreign locations.
Oh, where?
The Czech Republic, Cyprus, and Vietnam specifically, which strongly suggested, significant bot activity, foreign accounts being used deliberately to inject and circulate this disinformation into the American political bloodstream right during a very vulnerable election period.
So a concerted effort, potentially.
The pattern strongly suggests it wasn't purely organic interest, let's put it that way. Now, this initial massive amplification phase on Reddit did hit a speed bump. The Pizzagate subreddit got banned on November 23rd, 2016.
Why?
Violating Reddit's rules against doxing, posting private information, and harassment, which was happening constantly. But the ban wasn't the end of the story.
It just moved again.
Exactly. It wasn't a defeat for the theory. It just pushed the believers, the adherents, to other platforms. Places like Vote, which is basically a Reddit clone set up specifically to host the kind of far-right and conspiracy content that gets kicked off mainstream sites. The theory just migrated, found a new home, and was ready to keep evolving.
Okay, let's pivot then. Let's look at the actual claims themselves. To be fair to how this spread, we need to understand what the believers were pointing to. What was the evidence? Because as you said, they felt they weren't just making things up, they were deciphering real leaked data.
Right. They framed it as investigative work, uncovering hidden meanings. There were really four main lines of supposed evidence they constructed.
What's the first one?
The first and probably the most foundational claim was this idea of coded language in the emails. Theorists basically went through thousands of John Podesta's emails, mostly mundane stuff, logistics, scheduling, dinner plans, and argued that any discussion of food, especially things like pizza or hot dogs or cheese, was actually code.
Code for what?
For organizing crimes against children. They claimed this was how a secret cabal communicated about their trafficking operations.
And how did they make that leap? Just the words themselves?
It is often incredibly simplistic. The most famous example is cheese pizza. They fixated on the initials.
CP child pornography.
That was the claim, because the initials matched. And since some of the emails mention potential Democratic fundraisers or, just casual get-togethers happening at Comet Ping Pong, this, in their minds, cemented the restaurant's role. It wasn't just a random pizza place. It was the headquarters for the activities being discussed in this supposed code.
Just based on initials and the fact that people eat there sometimes.
Essentially, yes.
Oh.
But there was one piece of coded language evidence that they really held up as the smoking gun, the cornerstone, the thing they pointed to as definitive proof that these emails couldn't be literal.
Which one was that?
It's often called the handkerchief email. It's an exchange from September 2nd, 2014.
Okay, what did it say?
It does sound genuinely awkward if you just read it cold, and that's why it was so effective for them. A colleague emails Podesta about something a realtor found. It says, quote, "The realtor found a handkerchief. I think it has a map that seems pizza-related. Is it yours?"
Sick.
They can send it if you want.
A map? That seems pizza-related. On a handkerchief. Okay, that is weird.
It is weird. And Podesta's reply is really curt. Just, it's mine, but not worth worrying about.
Right. So the argument was, what? Why would a top political guy be so casual about losing a handkerchief with a pizza map on it?
Exactly. They argued
Yeah.
that phrasing is so non-literal, so dismissive, it must be hiding something unsavory, something secret. That specific exchange became Exhibit A for the coded communication theory.
Okay, so coded language, the handkerchief email, what else?
Well, then they moved beyond just the documents and tried to tie it physically to the location, Comet Ping Pong. They pointed to what they called suspicious connections, social connections, physical proximity.
Like what kind of connections?
Like the owner, James Alefantis. They noted he had political association. You know, John Podesta's brother, Tony, apparently ate there sometimes. A co-owner of a nearby business used to be a speechwriter for Clinton. Just proximity.
Guilt by association, basically. If you know a Democrat or work near one and own a pizza place.
To the conspiracy-minded, yes. The mere fact that political figures might be in the vicinity of food was twisted into evidence of a criminal conspiracy. And this quickly spun into a kind of digital witch hunt, focused specifically on the restaurant's online presence, particularly Alefantis' social media.
What did they find there, or claim to find?
They scrutinized his Instagram account. They pulled out photos, totally mundane pictures of his friends, family, even customers' kids playing at the restaurant. And they twisted them, wrongly interpreting them as proof of victims or secret signals. They also looked at flyers for local community events held at Comet, claiming the artwork depicted hidden child sex stuff.
That sounds like just seeing what you want to see.
It's a textbook example of something called apophenia. That's the psychological tendency, to perceive meaningful patterns or connections between totally unrelated things, like seeing faces in clouds or finding hidden messages in random noise.
So they weren't finding evidence, they were imposing a pattern.
Exactly. They were imposing this horrifying pattern onto just random data, a kid's drawing, a blurry photo, a weird email phrase, because it fit the pre-existing belief they already had about the evil of their political enemies.
Wow. Okay, so emails, connections, photos. What was the fourth leg of this?
The fourth area involved these very specific, almost theatrical spatial claims. Claims about the physical layout, designed to make the conspiracy feel grounded in the real world.
Like the tunnels.
Like the tunnels. First, they dragged another nearby business into it, Besta Pizza, just a few doors down from Comet Ping Pong. Why? Simply because its logo
Don't tell me.
vaguely resembled a symbol that, in completely different contexts, some people had alleged was associated with pedophiles online.
Just the logo.
Just the logo. And that led to the ultimate claim, the really dramatic one, that there were secret, underground sex trafficking tunnels connecting Comet Ping Pong not just to Besta Pizza, but also to the neighboring bookstore, Politics and Prose, a really respected local institution. And that's where, supposedly, the truly nefarious stuff was happening, down in these non-existent tunnels.
Okay, so that's the case they built. Circumstantial links, out-of-context emails, weird photos interpreted maliciously, and then these claims about secret tunnels based on a logo.
That's pretty much the believer's case, yeah. A collection of misinterpreted data points woven together. And now we get to the deconstruction. Because this whole structure, built like a house of cards, just completely collapses under, basic factual scrutiny and logic.
Where do we start? The tunnels seem like the easiest place.
Absolutely. Let's start with the physical evidence, because it's the most straightforwardly debunked. Remember the claim. Tunnels and basements connecting these businesses for trafficking.
Right.
Complete fabrication, built on absolutely nothing but rumor mongering. Comet Ping Pong have no basement.
Seriously, no basement at all.
It's a single-story building, no basement. This got so absurd that in 2016, the local business owners had to repeatedly go on the record looking exhausted, just stating the obvious. Bradley Graham, the co-owner of Politics and Prose, literally had to tell reporters with a straight face, "No tunnels exist beneath our store. We checked. We're not connected in any physical way with any of the other stores."
They had to check for tunnels.
They felt compelled to, given the insanity. And furthermore, there was this picture circulating online, supposedly showing the entrance to the sex tunnels under Comet Ping Pong. That was quickly traced. It was a photo taken in a completely different building, miles away. Totally unrelated.
Okay, so tunnels, basement, total fiction. What about the other visual evidence, like the owner's shirt?
Right. The photo claiming to show Alephantis wearing a shirt supposedly endorsing pedophilia. That also falls apart immediately under scrutiny. First off, the image wasn't even him. It was proven to be a picture of a different person entirely.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. And second, the shirt itself, it read "Je l'enfant," French for "I love the child."
Which sounds bad out of context.
Which sounds terrible out of context, and that's exactly what the conspiracists jumped on. But the reality, it was an innocent reference to the L'Enfant Cafe bar in Washington, D.C.
Named after
Pierre-Charles L'Enfant, the guy who designed the entire street layout of Washington, D.C. back in the 18th century. So, taking the name of a local D.C. landmark, maliciously misinterpreting it as this hidden criminal clue, it's just a perfect miniature example of how the whole conspiracy worked. Take something local, twist it into the most terrifying sexualized meaning possible.
Okay, physical evidence debunked. What about the linchpin, the coded language, the cheese pizza means child pornography idea?
Right. This is critical because the whole theory really hinges on this. The rational rebuttal here is kind of twofold. First, you look at the nature of the language itself. And second, you think about basic operational security for any criminal group.
Okay, the language first. What's the alternative explanation for the weird emails?
Well, critics and just people looking at it rationally argue the language is simply, well, maybe awkward, maybe pretentious. Some called it the language of overeducated dorks or foodies. Yeah, using inside jokes, maybe kind of arch-affected language about food. Podesta himself is known to be a serious food enthusiast, like obsessively so. And his social circle apparently included people who talked about fundraising events or dinner parties in this very informal, sometimes overly wordy, maybe slightly jokey way. It might sound weird to an outsider, sure. But is it more plausible that it's pseudo-intellectual banter about dinner, or that it's coded messages for a global child trafficking ring? The former seems vastly more likely.
Okay, Occam's razor, the simpler explanation, but what about the security angle?
This is the other huge logical flaw. Think about what the theory requires you to believe. These conspiracists claim they've uncovered this massive high-level global cabal of powerful political elites, running secret dungeons, trafficking kids worldwide. Now, if such incredibly powerful, presumably intelligent figures were trying to discuss these extremely serious crimes, and they were doing it in a communication channel they knew was vulnerable, like email, which they absolutely knew could be hacked or intercepted, what would they actually use?
Something secure, encryption, burner phones, not email.
Exactly. They'd use high-level sophisticated encryption or secure messaging apps. They would not, under any circumstance, use easily recognizable, ridiculously simple code words, like taking the initials of the crime, CP, and matching it to a common food, cheese pizza. That stands out. It creates the awkward, non-literal phrases like the handkerchief email that immediately look suspicious to anyone reading them.
So the code itself is too obvious. It defeats the purpose of being secret.
Completely defeats the purpose. The very fact that the language is noticeable and awkward means it's a terrible code for sensitive criminal activity. The theory forces you to believe these elites are simultaneously brilliant masterminds running a global trafficking ring and complete idiots who document their crimes using a cipher a middle schooler could crack in emails they know aren't secure. It just makes no logical sense.
But logic didn't seem to matter much here, did it? Because regardless of how flimsy or easily debunked this evidence was, the narrative jumped off the screen and into the real world. It caused real violence.
Shocking speed. That's the terrifying part. On December 4th, 2016, remember, the theory really only fully formed in early November, less than a month later. This guy, Edgar Madison Welch, 28 years old, from North Carolina. He drove 6 hours to Comet Ping Pong in D.C.
Believing he was what? A rescuer?
He genuinely seemed to believe he was a hero, a vigilante on a mission to rescue the children he was convinced were being held captive in those non-existent tunnels.
And he was armed.
He walked into the restaurant carrying an AR-15 assault rifle, and he fired it. 3 shots inside the premises while he was searching for the kids who weren't there. He told the police later, quote, he was there to self-investigate the conspiracy theory.
Self-investigate with an AR-15.
It's a critical moment because it shows the power of the delusion. He apparently didn't surrender until he was physically confronted with the evidence of his own eyes. There were no children trapped, there was no basement, there were no tunnels. The physical reality had to break through the conspiracy belief he'd absorbed online.
What happened to him?
Welch eventually pleaded guilty to federal and local charges. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison in June 2017. But his actions really highlighted this dangerous phenomenon of the epistemic community, or the echo chamber.
Meaning he only trusted information from inside his bubble.
Exactly. A closed loop where your sources of knowledge, your authorities are limited only to your group. It overrides everything else, all external, verifiable reality. Welch clearly prioritized what he read on 4chan or InfoWars over the physical reality right in front of his face.
And the violence wasn't just him, right? The harassment was ongoing.
Oh, it was widespread. And it was psychological terror. Comet Ping Pong, the other businesses dragged into it, Besta Pizza, Politics and Pros, another place called Little Red Fox. They received constant, terrifying harassment, death threats.
How bad was it?
The owners of Politics and Pros reported getting disturbing, graphic, and violent death threats. Sometimes, they said, at a rate of 10 to 15 an hour.
An hour? That's unimaginable.
It was a deliberate campaign of terror, clearly intended to punish these innocent people, maybe force them to close. And the threat didn't stop with Welch's arrest. In early 2017, another man, Yusuf Lee Jones, pleaded guilty to making threats against Besta Pizza. He actually said he wanted to, quote, finish what the other guy didn't.
Chilling.
And then, even later, in 2019, Comet Ping Pong itself suffered an arson attack. That incident was directly tied by investigators to QAnon, the successor conspiracy theory. So even though Pizzagate itself was debunked by law enforcement, the core ideas continued to fester and inspire real-world harm for years.
So the story didn't die, it just mutated, evolved.
Yeah.
Which brings us to QAnon and the deeper roots, right? The psychological reasons this stuff sticks around.
Exactly. Pizzagate essentially served as the necessary foundation, the blueprint, or maybe the precursor, for the much larger, much more sprawling QAnon phenomenon. Researchers often explicitly call QAnon Pizzagate on steroids.
How so? What did QAnon add?
It took that same core premise, powerful elites secretly abusing children, and just massively expanded it. It layered on ideas about mass political corruption, a deep state, and crucially, it added these elements of ritualistic murder.
Ritualistic.
Specifically, QAnon pushed the idea that the child abuse wasn't just abuse, it was part of satanic rituals. And these rituals involved murdering children to harvest a substance called adrenochrome.
Adrenochrome. What's that supposed to be?
In the QAnon lore, it's this elixir, a drug supposedly synthesized from the adrenal glands or the blood of terrified, traumatized children. And elites supposedly use it to get eternal youth or some kind of psychedelic high.
Okay, that's beyond bizarre. But why is that addition, the adrenochrome part, so significant?
Because that addition, the ritualistic murder, the harvesting of a substance from children's blood, that's what moves the modern theory out of just, quote-unquote, simple child abuse and puts it squarely, undeniably, into the historical territory of the Blood Libel.
The Blood Libel. Okay, explain that connection.
It's fascinating and terrifying because the Pizzagate narrative, especially on QAnon, added that motif of harvesting children's blood or vital essence for dark rituals. It taps directly into what historians sometimes call the conspiracy theory, the oldest, most adaptable pattern of prejudice we know, the Blood Libel.
So this isn't new at all. Where did the original Blood Libel come from?
It dates back centuries. The first documented case is usually traced to 12th century England, the story of William of Norwich. Around 1144, it was this false, horrific accusation that Jews had ritually murdered a young Christian boy.
And the claim was always ritual murder.
Initially, yes. It was designed to paint the targeted group, in this case, Jews, as completely irredeemably evil, enemies of Christ, enemies of society. The specific motif of using the child's blood seems to have been added a bit later, maybe around the 13th century.
Why blood specifically?
Well, some scholars point out this timing coincided with the Catholic Church putting a much greater emphasis on the doctrine of transubstantiation, the belief that the bread and wine become the body and blood of Christ. And there was increased veneration of Christ's actual blood in the Eucharist. So in a time when blood had this immense religious weight, accusing the designated outsider group of stealing Christian blood for their own dark rituals, that was an incredibly powerful theological and political weapon.
Wow. And how did these stories spread back then? Obviously no internet.
Right. And just like Pizzagate exploded because of new media, social media, forums, the original Blood Libel stories really gained massive traction. They truly took off in the 15th and 16th centuries. Why? Because of the new media technology of that era.
The printing press.
The printing press. Exactly. Cases like the alleged ritual murder of a boy named Simon of Trent in Italy in 1475 became huge sensations because they were written about in printed books and pamphlets.
So print turned local rumors into facts.
Pretty much. It turned what might have been localized, maybe church-driven or monastic rumors, into what readers all across Europe started considering solid historical accounts. Print allowed these stories, often accompanied by really graphic, horrific woodcut illustrations, to get into these incredibly important and influential printed histories of the world, as one historian put it. And that basically guaranteed that the lie would spread far beyond where it started and that it would endure for centuries.
And that connects to something you mentioned earlier, this idea of a limited vocabulary.
Yes, the limited vocabulary of hate. What scholars noticed is that because these widely circulated printed books and chronicles often only recorded the hostile, the bizarre, the horrific stories about Jews, stories that they killed Christian children, that they were expelled from places, that they were persecuted. It's severely limited how the general public could even imagine Jews. It basically cast them only as a source of danger or as victims of persecution, nothing else.
And you're saying Pizzagate and QAnon do the same thing to their targets today?
It's a very similar mechanism. Well, by casting the global elite, or Democrats, or whoever the target is, as literally engaging in satanic ritual torture and murder of children, it drastically limits how you can imagine them. It makes it much, much easier to normalize extreme hostility, even violence against them. Because how do you compromise with a satanic child trafficker who drinks blood? You don't. It frames the conflict as existential, good versus absolute evil.
Which leads us right back to why these theories, even when they're easily debunked by, the lack of abasement, why do they survive? Why do they thrive today?
They are fundamentally resilient. Partly because they provide simple answers in what feels like a chaotic world, and partly because they rely on that structure we talked about, the epistemic community, the echo chamber.
They feel good to believe in a weird way.
They can provide a sense of order, of understanding. They identify a clear enemy. They can make people feel like they possess secret, important knowledge that others don't have. And historically, these kinds of theories, anti-Semitic theories, and their modern, often secularized versions like Pizzagate, they function as these incredibly potent vessels.
Vessels for what?
For anxiety, for political grievance. They can be adapted to fit almost any political or cultural need, but the structure is always the same. There's a designated secretive enemy, whether it's coded as Jews or the global elite or whatever, who is secretly the source of all society's problems. They fill that void of explanation for complex issues with a simple, emotionally satisfying narrative. The world isn't just messy and complicated, it's being controlled by a hidden evil hand.
And is there any way to break that cycle? You mentioned the historical research comparing Western and Eastern Europe.
Right. That research is really telling. It looked at why blood libel accusations basically disappeared in Western Europe over time, but persisted much longer in parts of Eastern Europe. And there was a significant correlation with media consumption.
How so?
Where people had access to a more varied diet of readings and sources of knowledge, where printed materials presented diverse views of different people, different practices, the libels tended to fade away. But where the readership had access only to that single hostile narrative in print, the libels persisted much longer. Diversity of information seemed to be an antidote.
So, summing up Pizzagate then, what's the core takeaway?
What we saw with Pizzagate was fundamentally a manufactured story. It was disinformation, false information deliberately created with the intent to cause harm. And crucially, it was turbocharged by social media's amplification mechanisms. It inflicted measurable, profound harm on absolutely innocent people and businesses. And it proved really starkly how easily basic logic and verifiable facts can just be steamrolled when a compelling, scary narrative taps into these deeply rooted fears, even tapping into ancient, ugly tropes like the blood libel.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this right now, in this world just saturated with information, maybe even more saturated with disinformation? The antidote, it seems, to being trapped in an echo chamber, whether that chamber is built by the 15th century printing press or the 21st century social media algorithm, it always comes back to having a robust, critical thinking strategy.
Yeah, and we've seen, haven't we, that just relying on the platforms themselves to stop the spread, well, it's clearly not enough. These stories just find new homes, they migrate. So the really critical question seems to remain: how much responsibility falls on you, on the individual, to cultivate that deep, skeptical scrutiny for every single piece of emotionally charged content you encounter online? Is it even possible for most people to achieve that balance between, healthy skepticism of authority and narratives versus accepting verifiable facts when they're presented?
It's definitely a question worth pondering deeply, because history seems to show again and again that the willingness to believe the absolute worst story about the people you already dislike, well, that might just be the oldest trick in the book.
Thank you for joining us on Conspiracy Deconstructed. We'll be back next time with another topic demanding our attention.